Good evening to all. Welcome to the 19th online lecture of the course Experimental Methods in Thermal Engineering. In our previous lecture, we have started discussion on the measurement of velocity and its companions, and in particular, we have discussed about the obstruction-based flow measurement technique. Okay, and in particular, we have talked about venturimeter, uh, flow nozzles, and orifice meters. Okay. So what I will do, I will today continue our discussion on the measurement of flow. So in Venturi meters, I have already shown you this particular photograph. So this particular photograph is actually based on the ASME standards, where recommended proportions are given for each and every parameter. So what are the different parameters? These are specified in this particular sketch, and then we are having the corresponding geometric proportions which are mentioned over here. Okay. Now, particularly if you see, one important parameter we are having, that is known as the angle of divergence. So in this particular section of the Venturi is nothing but referred to as the divergence section. Over here, what is happening? Okay. So over here you can see that alpha 2 is this angle. So the value of alpha 2 is specified from 5 degree to 15 degree. Okay. So this is actually the limiting value for alpha. In case of these Venturi meters, the value of alpha is actually maximum value of alpha 2. So it is limited to 15 degrees. So why it is limited to 15 degrees, that is something we can explain, or we can obtain its explanation from the concepts of basic fluid mechanics. Okay, so we all know about boundary conditions and boundary layer theory, and in particular what will be happening, this is nothing but we are having surface, and over this surface we will be having the development of some velocity profile. Okay, so if I consider this direction as nothing, my radial direction, so this is my center, and let us consider that in this center, about its center, we are having the variation of parameter along r as radial direction. So obviously at the wall, by considering no slip boundary condition, we will be having zero velocity, and at any other radial location other than the wall, we will be having certain velocity, and that velocity will be actually increasing when we will be moving towards the center. So we will be having velocity profile something like this. Okay, so velocity profile we will be finding something like this. So this type of velocity profile we will be having over here. Now particularly what will be happening in this divergence zone, if you see, our area is actually gradually increasing. Okay, so as our area is increasing, because of increase in area, what will be happening, we will be having decrease of velocity, and in order to satisfy the continuity equation, we will be having in order to satisfy the Bernoulli's equation, we will be having increase of pressure. Okay, so nothing but from here you can see that if I take any 2 points over here, say let us consider that P1 is the pressure at this point and P2 is the pressure at this point. Okay, so because when we are moving from location number 1 to location number 2, then our cross section is actually gradually increasing. Because of that, what will be happening, pressure at point P2 will be greater in comparison to pressure at point P1. Okay, so now if I define the pressure gradient for this particularly this divergence section, so in this section what will be happening, if I consider, say x is my axial direction. Okay, so dp by dx will be nothing but equal to P2 minus P1 divided by x2 minus x1. Okay, so you can see over here x2 is greater than x1 and P2 is also greater than P1. So it means whatever the pressure gradient you are getting, that is nothing but we are having a positive pressure gradient in this particular divergence section. Okay, so this type of positive pressure gradient, when it exists along the direction of the flow, it is nothing but referred to as the situation of adverse pressure gradient. Okay, because it is not favorable for the flow to occur in that direction. Okay, so this particular type of pressure is referred to as adverse pressure gradient, and if we are having rapid increase of the pressure in any cross section, so there may be the chances of flow separation. Okay, so how flow separation occurs? For example, if we are having any inclined section, say this is my inclined section, and in this section what will be happening, I'll be having velocity profile something like this. Okay, now if the inclination of the this surface is such that, so that we are having very rapid increase of the pressure, so because of that rapid increase of the pressure, we will be finding somewhere a situation where our gradient of the velocity will be becoming actually zero. So it means we will be having velocity profile something like this. Okay, so in this particular velocity profile, at this point now you can see that our value of velocity gradient in y direction is nothing but equal to 0. Okay, so this particular condition is nothing but known as the start point for the separation of the flow. So when we will be going beyond this point, what will be happening? Now beyond this point, we will be having the adjustment of velocity profile in such a fashion so that we are having some reverse flow, particularly in this zone which is very close to the surface. Okay, so over here we will be having the situation where del u by del y will become less than 0. Okay, so this particular situation is actually known as flow separation. So obviously what we want, because while we are trying to or obtaining this particular equation, we are considering that our flow is taking place in the forward direction, and we are not considering for any type of losses which are associated due to this type of reverse flow near the surface of the wall. So that's why while we are designing this particular type of device, we will be considering our angle of divergence in such a fashion so that we are not having any separation of the flow. Okay, so what we have to do, we have to vary the pressure in a gradual manner rather than we are having any rapid increase of the pressure value. Okay, so because of that, what is generally done while we design the Venturi meter, we are having limiting value for this angle of divergence. Okay, so and the maximum value which is recommended is 15 degrees. So always when we are designing the Venturi, our angle should be less than 15 degrees. Okay, then we are having another device which I have already told you. So this particular device is known as flow nozzle. So flow nozzle is something which is actually nothing but comes in between the Venturi meter and the orifice meters. Okay, so for this type of flow nozzles also, we are having some standards based on which we can design the different dimensions. So particularly if you are having D as the pipe diameter, capital D, so you can see that the different parameters of the nozzle are actually defined in proportion to this parameter D, which is actually our pipe diameter. Okay, so we are having over here the design for two different type of nozzles, and particularly the nozzles which are shown over here, these are nothing but the long radius nozzles. Okay, so over here we are not having much fluidic parameters which are to be specified. The only consideration you have to take care that while you are designing the nozzle, you have to consider the proportion of the dimensions as per this recommendation from the ASME standards. Okay, then obviously for nozzles also we will be having some relationship in between the actual and the theoretical flow rate, and obviously that relationship comes from the knowledge of coefficient of discharge. So over here one chart has been given, so you can see along the ordinate coefficient of discharge is plotted, and along the abscissa we are having nothing but Reynolds number, and this particular Reynolds number is defined based on the pipe diameter as the length scale. So that's why it is called as pipe Reynolds number. And then what we are having on this plot different lines, and these different lines are nothing but corresponding to the expansion ratio beta, which is nothing but small d by capital D. Okay, so for depending upon the pipe Reynolds number and the corresponding expansion ratio of the device, we can obtain the value of coefficient of discharge. Okay, so that is something which you can obtain from here. And as I have told you earlier, in case of Venturi meter, that if we don't want to take the value of coefficient of discharge from these charts which are given over here, what you can do, you can just test your device against a known standard, and from there also you can obtain the value of coefficient of discharge. Okay. Then what we are having now, I have told you in our previous lecture that while we use the orifice plate, so we are having three different specific locations at which we have to employ the pressure taps while we are actually measuring the pressure drop across the orifice plate. Okay. So one of the location is over here. You can see this is nothing but this particular section refers to the flange of the orifice plate. So one of the recommended location is two ends of the flange. So you can see this is one end of the flange, and this is the pressure tap on the downstream of the orifice plate. So first is we can have both the pressure taps on the flange itself. Okay, the flange which is actually holding our orifice plate. Okay, so that is one location. Another location is recommended that we can have one pressure tap at D diameter before the location of the orifice plate in the upstream direction. Okay, so for example, you can see over here we are considering 1D upstream location for specifying our for connecting our pressure tap. Okay, then another location which we will be having, because over here we have to measure the differential pressure, so the another tap we have to consider on the downstream of the orifice plate. So in the downstream of the orifice plate, recommended size is actually D by 2. Okay, so that is one recommended location. And third recommended configuration is that inlet tap or upstream tap we will be connecting at D diameter before the orifice plate. And while we will be specifying the pressure tap, or while we will be locating the pressure tap in the downstream of the orifice plate, what will be happening basically, while the flow will be happening through this orifice plate, we will be having formation of vena contracta. Okay, so what is vena contracta? Nothing but close to the immediately downstream of the orifice plate, we will be having convergence of the flow, and we will be getting minimum flow area. So this particular size of the minimum flow area and the location at which this occurs is referred to as the vena contracta. Okay, so what we can do, we can employ our pressure tap exactly at the location of the vena contracta. So that is the actually third configuration which is recommended for employing the pressure taps across the orifice plate. Okay, so but what will be happening, depending upon the flow conditions or the expansion ratio, we will be having different locations for the occurrence of the vena contracta. So we are having one plot over here. So where we are having beta, this expansion factor along the ordinate, and along the abscissa we are having pipe diameter from inlet face of orifice plate. Okay, so nothing but what we are having distance x in terms of z times d, and the value of z is specified over here as 0.2, 0.3, 0.4. So now what we are having one line over here, and this particular line is actually available for concentric orifice plates. Okay, so if we are having this type of orifice obstruction. Okay, and in this particular arrangement, what will be happening, depending upon the expansion ratio, it means expansion ratio is nothing but this small diameter small d divided by ratio of the capital D. So small d by capital D, if we just intersect with this line, we can find out the corresponding Z factor over here, and then if we multiply that Z factor with the diameter of the pipe, then based on that actually we can find out the location in the downstream of the orifice plate where we have to connect the pressure plate. Okay. Then like other devices, we are having this one charts already obtained for determining the flow coefficients of concentric orifices also, and this particular plot is actually given for the second configuration of pressure taps. Okay, so this point is very important, that whatever the chart I am showing over here, this is applicable for second configuration of pressure tapping. So what we are having in second configuration, we are having upstream pressure tapping at 1D from the orifice plate, and in the downstream we are having at location of D by 2. Okay, so for this particular combination we are having the curves depending upon the ratio of the orifice diameter to pipe diameter and the flow Reynolds number, and this particular flow Reynolds number is actually calculated based on the pipe diameter, and this plot is applicable for the diameter of the pipe within the range 1.25 to 3 inches. Okay, so by using this plot we can determine the value of flow coefficient, and we can employ our orifice meter for measurement of the flow rate. Then comes the another particular type of flow measurement device, and this particular type of flow measurement device is mainly applicable for measuring the flow rate of gases, and particularly this will be applicable in the range of compressible flow. Okay, so what happens while we are having the nozzle? So obviously what will be happening inside the nozzle, we will be having increase of the velocity. Okay, and we will be having some pressure drop across the nozzle. So for example, at the inlet, if I consider P1 as the pressure and P2 as the pressure at the outlet of the nozzle. So what will be happening when we will be we will keep on increasing the flow rate, we will be having some increase in the pressure drop, and we will be finding a limiting condition at which irrespective of the outlet pressure, we will be having actually some fixed flow rate which will be only dependent upon the inlet stagnant pressure, okay, which is acting over the nozzle. So that particular type of situation is referred to as choked condition. So in this choked condition, whatever the pressure drop we get across the nozzle, that particular pressure drop is nothing but our critical pressure drop. So that using the basic formula drop across the nozzle corresponding to the sonic flow situation is nothing but equal to 2 divided by gamma plus 1 whole to power gamma divided by gamma minus 1. Here gamma is nothing but ratio of the specific heats, means specific heat at constant pressure divided by specific heat at constant volume. Okay, so when we are having this kind of sonic flow situation, corresponding to that, if we have to find out the mass flow rate of the gaseous phase, that is obtained using this particular relation, A2 times P1 into square root 2 Gc divided by RT1 into gamma by gamma plus 1 multiplied by 2 divided by gamma into gamma plus 1 and raised to power 2 by gamma minus 1 and whole square root. Okay, so this is nothing but, this represents over here the theoretical mass flow rate which will be there across the nozzle. But what will be happening if we have to find out the actual mass flow rate, then obviously we have to determine the coefficient of discharge. So what we can do, we can actually calibrate our device using some known standards for finding out the coefficient of discharge. But generally, if you consider for this type of sonic nozzles, we are having this value of discharge coefficient nearly equal to 0.97. Okay. Now, what we will be doing, once again, we are having some sort of obstruction in our flow direction, based on which actually we will be finding out the value of pressure, but value of the flow. But earlier, what was happening across the obstruction, actually we were measuring the pressure change. Okay. Now, whatever the obstruction we will be doing, we will not be employing the change in pressure across the obstruction to measure the flow. Rather, we will be using the other concepts, and particularly we will be having the measurement of the flow because of the drag effects. Okay, so the very fundamental meter or device which is used for obtaining the flow rate using this principle of drag is something which is known as a rotameter. Okay, and rotameter is a very popular device, and also uses this rotameter for used for measurement of both liquid as well as the gases. Okay, now the construction of the rotameter is nothing but, we are having a tapered tube, and in this tapered tube we are having the flow of fluid, and always this tube is actually located in a in vertical orientation. Okay, then we are having some floating bob, and this floating bob is having some specific shape, and what we are doing, we are considering that say maximum radial span of this floating bob is nothing but equal to small d. Okay, now what will be happening while we will be having the flow in this particular direction, so obviously this bob will be having certain weight, so because of its weight it will try to fall in the downward direction, but we are having the flow of fluid in the upward direction, so that flow of the fluid will be actually passing through this annular cross section which is there in between the periphery of the bob and this tapered glass tube. So over here what will be happening, we will be having some drag force which will be acting over this surface, and that drag force will try to move it in upward direction. Okay, and at the same point of time, because this particular area or this particular volume of the floating object is also displacing certain amount of fluid, so because of that we will be having some buoyancy force also in the upward direction. Okay, so if we consider the static equilibrium position, so for static equilibrium what we will be having, we will be having nothing but buoyancy force, because it is acting in upward direction, plus drag force. So I'm considering the sign of the force in positive y direction as positive. So drag force is also acting in upward direction. So both these forces will be balancing nothing but our weight of the floating object, which is acting in the downward direction. Okay. So now we know that buoyancy force will be nothing but equal to rho f, where rho f is the density of the fluid which is flowing in this upward direction, times volume of the floating object, say Vb is the volume, times gravity. Okay. Then drag force, we know that it is nothing but equal to coefficient of drag Ct into half density of fluid rho f into, let us consider that um is the mean velocity which is actually uh, through the annular cross section which is there in between the floating object and the tapered tube. Okay, so we will be having u1 square into frontal area of this particular floating object. So let us consider that frontal area of this floating object is nothing but equal to AB. Okay, so this drag force and the buoyancy force will be nothing but equal to our weight. So weight will be rho into B, where this rho B refers to the density of the floating object multiplied by its volume multiplied by gravity. Okay, so using this static equilibrium position, you can determine the value of velocity, average velocity um, as nothing but equal to square root of uh, rho b minus rho f times vb into g divided by cd into cd into rho f ab and multiplied by 2. Okay, so you can see that when we are having the static equilibrium, it means we are having the balance in between the weight, drag and the buoyancy forces corresponding to that particular situation, because we are having the specific shape of this floating object and it is having certain fixed amount of weight which is not changing during the measurement. Okay, so it means corresponding to the static equilibrium position, we will be having the occurrence of only a fixed velocity um. So when we are having this velocity um in the annular flow area, then only our this floating object will be in the equilibrium position or in the static position. And apart from that, if our flow velocity is more or less, then the value of this um, in that case what will be happening, we will be having either upward or downward motion of this floating object. Okay, so now here comes one important point, that why we are considering the tapered tube while we are constructing our this device. Okay, why we are not going for the straight tube. So what will be happening in case of straight tube, uh, always we will be having the fixed cross section in between our floating object, and consider this as my constant cross section tube, and this is my floating object. So now you can see that wherever we go, we are having nothing but the fixed cross section. Okay, so because of that fixed cross section, what will be happening when we will be varying the flow rate? Then because of that, we will be having actually change in value of flow velocity across the annular space. So because of that, if we are increasing the flow rate, our value of velocity will be increasing up beyond the required value of velocity for maintaining static equilibrium position. So in that case, our floating object will always try to move in the upward direction. And if we are having the flow rate value which is less in comparison to the required velocity to maintain the static equilibrium position, in that case our float will be actually falling in the downward direction. Okay, so what we do over here, we take uh, tapered cross section. So what this tapered cross section does, while the flow rate will be increasing, so because of the increase in flow rate, so let us consider that initially our float was at, say, this particular location number 1. Okay, and corresponding to this we were having, say, some value q1 of the fluid flow rate which is passing through this one. Okay, now let us consider that we have increased our flow rate from q1 to q2. So my q2 is nothing but greater than q1. So in that case, what will be happening? Now our velocity, if we are considering that my float is lying at this section only, because now we have increased the flow rate, so our flow area has not changed. So because of that, my velocity corresponding to point number 2 will be now greater in comparison to velocity corresponding to point number 1. Okay, so because of that, what will be happening? Our drag force, which will be acting across the floating object, that will be increasing. So drag force is acting in nothing but upward direction. So because of that, our float will be moving in the upward direction. Okay, and it will be moving in upward direction unless or until we are getting the static equilibrium position. It means it will keep on moving in upward direction till the point when flow velocity is becoming equivalent to that of the value of u1. Okay, so why flow velocity will decrease? Because now when the float will be moving in upward direction, because of the tapered tube, now we will be having increase in area which is available for the flow. So because of that, what will be happening? Value of um will be decreasing, um2 will be decreasing, and once the value of um2 is reaching to the value equal to um, whatever is required for the static equilibrium position, at that point our float will be actually reaching to the static equilibrium position. Okay, so this is the purpose of maintaining this taper over here. And generally what is done, the taper is selected in such a fashion so that whenever we are getting the scale of flow rate, we are placing over this tapered cross section, because for corresponding to each flow rate we will be having some specific location of the flow. Okay, so this taper angle is selected in such a fashion so that we are having linear scale of the flow rate in the vertical direction. Okay, now let us try to see that how we can employ this velocity um to find out the value of volumetric flow rate. Okay, so what we will be having, we know that volumetric flow rate is nothing but equal to area times velocity. So if we consider that A is flow area, so we are having velocity as nothing but equal to u1, because u1 is the velocity corresponding to the static equilibrium position, and for each un we are having the occurrence of static equilibrium position, and for each flow rate we are having some different location of the flow in our across the length of that loop. Okay, so now if I have to determine the value of this area will be nothing but equal to over here what we are having this E as the diameter at the inlet, and if I consider that my diameter along the length is nothing but increasing at rate A, so I can write that at any arbitrary location y, my diameter of the tube will be nothing but d plus ay. Okay, so using this particular formulation, I can write that my flow area will be nothing but equal to pi by 4 times d plus ay whole square, minus we are having this small d as the diameter corresponding to the frontal area of the float. So because of that we will be having minus d square over here, because our flow is mainly taking place through the annular section while we are having the static equilibrium in between our uh, flow rate and the position of the float. Okay, so now what we will be doing, we are having this area over here. If I want to determine now the corresponding mass flow rate, so that will be nothing but equal to rho f times q, where rho f is density of the fluid. So I can write rho f into a and multiplied by um. So for already we have obtained the expression in my previous slide, and which is equal to square root of uh, rho b minus rho f times Vb into G divided by 2 into Cd into rho f times AF. Okay. So in this particular expression, if you try to see nothing but if we are already knowing the rate at which our slope is increasing. So if we consider that A is a known parameter, so obviously this value of A will be constant, and volume of the float, frontal area of the float, density of the fluid, these and CD coefficient of discharge, all these parameters will be nothing but these are constant. So in that case, we will be finding that my mass flow rate will be equal to C1 times, and with this area, though if you see over here, what we will be finding, we will be finding that this area will be varying in square of y, but generally while for the practical applications we manufacture our devices, we try to always take the linear relationship in between the vertical location and the area. Okay, so I can simply consider all other parameters as constant, and I can simply write over here that my mass flow rate is nothing but C1 times Y into square root of, and this Y is nothing but is included in order to account for the taper of the tube. Okay, so I can write mass flow rate as C1 times Y into rho B minus rho f, and over here also once again, because outside also we are having one rho f and one rho f is over here, so we will be getting one rho f inside the square root. Okay, and all other parameters I am considering as constant, and all these are actually accounted in C1, and in order to account for variation of the flow area, what we are doing, we are considering over here y. Okay, so this is the formulation of mass flow rate. Now particularly when we employ this rotameter for measurement of the flow rate of gases, in that case what will be happening, density of the floating material will be very large in comparison to the density of the fluid medium. So in that case what I can do, this product difference of rho b minus rho f, I can write approximately equal to rho f. So in that case what will be happening, my mass flow rate of the gaseous phase will be nothing but proportional to the square root of rho f. Okay, because I can consider now this rho b as constant. Okay, so in that case what will be happening, because density of the this gaseous phase, by using the ideal gas equation, I can write P into V is equal to RT, and from here we know that this V is nothing but 1 by rho. So my 1 by rho will be equal to RT by P. So I can simply write my mass flow rate will be nothing but proportional to the square root of P divided by RT. Okay, so that will be applicable when we are measuring the flow rate of the gaseous phase. Okay, then particular device is known as a turbine flow meter. So the turbine flow meter is very popular device for measurement of the flow. Why it is popular? Because it can work over the wide range of temperature and flow conditions. Okay, so we are if we are having very wide range of the flow rate, so it can work for that wide range with greater accuracy, and as well as we can employ it for the wide range of temperatures. So you can see over here the construction of this turbine flow meter is nothing but it includes a pipe cross section. So this you can see this is nothing but a pipe or tube which will be actually connected to your main pipeline where you want to do the measurement. Then we are having one turbine like structure over here, and in this particular turbine like structure we are having small permanent magnet mounted over it. Okay, then we are having some flow straightener over here at the inlet of this turbine flow meter in order to guide the flow in particular direction. And this flow, while will be flowing over the blades of the turbine, we will be having some rotation of these turbine blades. Okay, and it is found that the rotation frequency of this turbine. So what we are having, this rotation frequency of the turbine is nothing but proportional to the velocity of the flow. So whatever the flow velocity we will be having, corresponding to that we will be having changes in the rotation frequency. Now we are having some coil over here. So this particular coil is actually employed to measure the rotations of the turbine. Okay, so this can be one configuration, or we can have another configuration where we will be having metallic turbine body. So we will be having some metallic turbine body, and when we are actually having the coil, in this coil itself, this metallic body of the turbine will be rotating. It will be changing the magnetic field across the coil. So because of based on that change in magnetic field, we will be actually determining the number of rotations, and this rotation frequency is nothing but a function of the flow rate. Okay, so using this turbine flow meter, we can determine that volumetric flow rate is nothing but equal to F divided by K, where this F is the frequency of rotation of the turbine blades, and this K is something which is known as a flow coefficient. Okay, and this particular flow coefficient depends upon, so it's a function of kinematic viscosity, and it's also a function of flow rate of the fluid. So for different flow rate also, the value of flow coefficient will be changing. Okay, so we are having one plot over here, and in this particular plot you can see over here the flow coefficient K is given in terms of cycles per gallon. Okay, so 1 gallon is nothing but equal to 3.78 liters. So you can do the conversion accordingly while we will be solving the numericals. And along the abscissa we are having cycles per second divided by our kinematic viscosity in centistrokes, and corresponding to that we are having the different values of K. So by knowing these two parameters, we can determine the value of K for a particular turbine flow meter. Okay. Another type of flow measurement device includes the vortex setting flow meter. So in this particular type of arrangements, what we do, we create some obstruction. So we take a bluff body inside our flow pipeline. So while the flow will be taking place over this bluff body, we will be having the generation of some vortex structure. So we will be actually determining the frequency of this vortex structures, and that frequency of the vortex structures is nothing but proportional to the local velocity of the flow. Okay, so local velocity of the flow is proportional to frequency of these vortices which are forming over here. So you can see one vortex is forming in the upward direction and one vortex is forming in the downward direction. So like that we will be having alternate sequence of the vortices in the downstream of this bluff body. Okay, so this particular over here what we will be having, we are having one dimensionless parameter which is known as Strouhal number. So this particular non-dimensional parameter relates the frequency of the vortex setting with the velocity. So you can see that the definition of Strouhal number is nothing but equal to Fs times d divided by u, where this d refers to the characteristic dimension of this bluff body. Okay, so this is characteristic dimension. Now if you plot the variation of Strouhal number as function of the flow Reynolds number, you will be finding that initially this Strouhal number will be increasing with increase of the flow Reynolds number, and particularly over the range of Reynolds number from 10 to power 4 to 10 to power 6, the value of Strouhal number will be constant and it will be in the range of around 0.88, and after that there will be slight fall in the value of the stall number, and once again it will keep on increasing with increase of the flow Reynolds number. Okay, so because what is happening over here, within the range of Reynolds number of 10 to power 4 to 10 to power 6, we are having the constant value of the stall number. So what we want to do normally when we design our vortex setting based flow meters, we consider this particular range of the Reynolds number. So what we will be doing, we will be selecting the diameter of this external tubing, which is actually enclosing our bluff body in such a fashion so that we are getting this range of the Reynolds number. So because of that, what will be happening, we will be having the fixed value of Stall number. So we will be having direct relationship between the frequency and the velocity. Okay, so this particular type of device, apart from measurement of the flow, it can be employed for measurement of the velocity also, and it can be employed for developing the velocity profile inside a pipeline. Okay, so what we can do, we can take a smaller diameter tube, and inside that smaller diameter tube, we can place a very small mechanical bluff body, which will be actually producing the alternate vortex streams. So because of that, what will be happening, if we consider that we are having a large pipeline, and across this large pipeline, if we place small number of tubes at different locations in the radial direction, so what we will be doing, we will be getting nothing but localized velocity at that particular radial direction. So based on the values of the localized velocities, we can plot or obtain the velocity profile. Okay. Now, one important point just I would like to mention over here. So what we do, we place some piezoelectric material inside this bluff body itself in order to measure the frequency of these vortices which are being produced in the downstream of the flow. Okay. Then we are having another particular type of flow measurement device, and it's known as ultrasonic flow meter. So it is based on the principle of Doppler's effect. So over here, what we do, we generally consider a transmitter and we consider receiver unit. So transmitter unit, both these transmitter and receiver units, these are made up of piezoelectric materials. So what we will be doing in the transmitter unit, we will be giving some voltage signal, and that voltage signal will be producing the ultrasonic signals. And in the receiver unit, while these ultrasonic signals are received, so what will be happening, they will be generating some voltage signal. Okay, and depending upon that voltage, actually we will be determining that how much change is there in between the signal frequency while it is coming from transmitter to the receiver unit. Okay, so this type of flow measurement devices, when these are used in earlier days, so in that case, what was considered that within the flow we are having some particles, and these particles may be small air bubbles in our flow, or these may be some solid particles in our flow. Okay, so because of these particles, what will be happening while this transmitted signal will be interacting with the particle, our signal will be reflected from the particle, and depending upon the amount of reflection, there will be some shift in frequency of the signal, and that shift will be actually determined by the receiver, and that shift in the signal is nothing but proportional to the flow rate. Okay, so initial days, while these type of ultrasonic flow meters were used, generally the criteria was that we should have at least 30 ppm, so 30 parts per million of some solid particles or either some air bubbles inside our liquid for which we want to do the measurement of the flow rate, and particularly the diameter of this micrometers. Okay, so that was the initial condition, initial criteria which was employed for measurement of the flow. And later on, what has been done, there has been many advancements in the development of the ultrasonic flow meters. So apart from that, one more configuration has been used where where both transmitter and receiver devices are placed on the same side of the pipe. Okay, so because of that, what has happened in one condition, particularly this first device. So I am writing over here 1 and 2. Okay. So, and I am considering that flow inside this pipe is actually taking place from left to right direction. So what was done initially in the first trial, this was considered as, one was considered as transmitter and second was considered as receiver. Okay. So what has happened, the transmitter has produced some signal, and that signal has actually passed through the flow, and it has then reached the another periphery of this pipe surface. Okay, and from the surface of the pipe, then the signal has got reflected, and this signal is then actually received by the transducer number 2. Okay, so in this particular configuration, you can see over here that your transmission of the signal is actually taking place in the direction of the flow. Then what was done, so over here the time period is measured, which is required for reaching the signal from first transducer to the second transducer. Okay. In second configuration, what is done? The signal is generated from this second transducer. Okay. And it has moved against the flow, and then it has actually been recorded at transducer number 1. So corresponding to that, once again, some time period is measured. So say that time period is nothing but T2. Now the difference of the T1 and T2 is recorded for different flow rates, and it is observed that this difference between the two time periods is nothing but a strong function of the flow rate, volumetric flow rate, whatever we are having while fluid is flowing. Okay, so if we consider this type of configuration, then we need not to add any particle over here. So in the recent years, such type of arrangements are also being employed for accurate measurement of the flow based on the principle of ultrasonic flow meters without addition of any particles into the liquid. Okay. Then one more configuration can be employed, and in that particular configuration, what is done, so now I am drawing the top view of the pipe. So in this particular configuration, what is done, we will be having some transmitters and some receivers on the opposite ends of the tube. Okay, so what will be happening while the flow is happening in this direction? First, this will be acting as a transmitter. So from here, some signal will be reaching to this location, and then what will be happening? We will consider another transmitter adjacent to this, and we will be having some receiver over here. So because of that, also we will be having some signal which will be moving against the flow. So once again, the idea is that one time we have to pass the signal in the direction of the flow, and second time we have to acquire the signal in the direction opposite to that of the flow. Okay, and both these things are to be done in almost in the parallel condition, so that we are not having much fluctuations inside our flow field. Okay, so considering this difference of the time period, actually flow rate can be determined. Now the advantage of ultrasonic flow meters is that this type of meters can be employed for measurement of the velocity of complex fluids. Okay, so by complex fluids I can refer to the different type of fluids which can deteriorate other type of flow measurement devices. For example, if we are having slurry, so means some solid particles are dispersed inside the liquid water. Okay, so what will be happening? These solid particles may erode the surface of other type of flow measurement devices. However, in case of ultrasonic flow meters, what we will be having, we need not to connect any external mechanical arrangement inside the flow field. Rather, whatever the pipe we are having, on the surface of that pipe, we will be fixing our transmitter and receiver unit. Okay, so that's why for different type of complex fluids, for example, slurry, wastewater, sludge flow, then flow of abrasive particles inside our liquids, for all these type of situations, we can employ the ultrasonic flow meters for accurate measurement of the flow rate. Okay. Then another type of flow measurement device is nothing but it's known as laminar flow meter. So it's very simple. So what we will be doing, we will be having nothing but a pipe, and inside that pipe, across the two ends of the pipe, we will be measuring two we will be having some arrangement for measurement of the pressure. So for example, P1 and P2 are the two different pressures. So now we know that if we are having laminar flow situation, then considering the Hazen-Poiseuille equation, we can determine the relationship in between the volumetric flow rate and the pressure drop. So that relationship is nothing but equal to pi into d to power 4 Q1 minus Q2. So this Q1 minus Q2 I can call as nothing but my delta P, and 128 P into L. The only issue will be coming over here. We have to apply over here some correction in order to apply in order to account for the boundary effects, because while fluid will be entering into this small pipe, so at that particular point of time what will be happening, we will be having some entrance effects, and because of the entrance effect we will be having some certain pressure losses in addition to the frictional pressure loss which we are measuring across the length of the pipe. Okay, so we have to apply small correction over here. Okay, however, if we are employing this particular device for measurement of the flow in case of high Reynolds number flow, so what we can do, across the cross section of the pipe we can actually have large number of small tube, and so what will be happening, flow will be actually divided into these small tubes, and inside each of the tube we will be having less velocity and less diameter. So over here you can see, for example, initially while the flow was happening through this entire tube, at that time we were having say diameter as d, and now what will be happening, we will be having the diameter of this tube will be actually very small. So because of that, what will be happening, we will be having decrease in length scale of the tube. So what we can do, we can divide our tube surface into large number of small tubes, and we will be measuring the pressure drop across the two ends of this tube assembly, which is inserted into our flow pipeline. Okay, and what will be happening, because we are having these parallel pipes arrangement, so because of that, throughout each and every pipe, if we consider that uniform flow is uniformly distributed throughout each and every pipe, we will be having same amount of pressure drop. Okay, so this is the very simplest device which can be employed for measurement of the flow, and particularly these type of devices are recommended when we want to measure the flow rate of the gaseous phase, and that too particularly at very low flow rates. Okay, and apart from that, it can be used for measurement of the liquid flow rates also, but in that case we have to also estimate, or we have to use the optimum value of the diameter of this small tube and the length in order to have a relationship in between the pressure drop and the flow Reynolds number. Okay, so what I will do, I will stop at this point, and other type of flow measurement device we will try to see in our next lecture.